Season 2 of Solo Leveling ended with Jinwoo stepping into a mysterious dungeon, one that suddenly turned red. But what lies beyond that glowing gate is far more dangerous. The story is just getting started, and this is where things get serious. Once Jinwoo finished off the first wave of magical beasts in the Red Gate, he moved forward, his summoned soldiers close behind, ready for the next challenge. Suddenly, the dungeon boss appeared, surrounded by its strongest guards. The moment the boss saw the ruined battlefield, it froze. Every one of its soldiers had already been wiped out. Jinwoo couldn't help but find that scene a bit amusing. He signaled to his shadow soldiers to step into view and, with a calm look, ordered them to eliminate the remaining threats. Together, Jinwoo and his shadow army advanced, their presence so powerful it made the air feel tense. The boss, sensing danger, launched itself at them, but it didn't stand a chance. What followed was pure chaos. Jinwoo's forces tore through the guards like paper, dismantling them one by one. The boss watched in horror as its army vanished, its panicked cries echoing through the dungeon, calling for help that wouldn't come. Finally, the boss tried a desperate move, charging straight at Jinwoo. But Baru was faster. In the blink of an eye, Baru's claws sank into the beast's body. Igris was next, slicing off one of its arms in a single, clean strike. Then Tusk slammed into the boss with such force that the whole room shook, sending it crashing to the ground. When the dust settled, Jinwoo stepped forward. There, lying in a pool of its own blood and barely alive, was the boss. Jinwoo demanded answers, but the creature stayed silent, most likely because the system was blocking it again. He gave a small sigh and pushed that thought aside. There was something more important on his mind. He opened his inventory, focused, and pulled out a small, strange-looking key. The cursed random box key he'd received after defeating Baron in the Demon Castle. Back then, it had offered no clues, and he'd been left wondering what it was for. But now, having reached level 100 after conquering the Jeju Island raid, the time had come. The system finally revealed the key's purpose. It unlocked the gate to Kartinon Temple. A message told him that the exact location of the gate would appear after a set amount of time. The name, Kartinon Temple, sounded familiar. Memories rushed back. Of the double dungeon, the ancient temple at its deepest point, the creepy stone statues, and the stone slate one of them held. Suddenly, everything clicked. The system had been guiding him back to where his story really began. If this had been planned from the very start, if the system had been waiting for him to return, then Jinwoo knew he couldn't ignore it. A new challenge was waiting, and he was ready. With firm resolve, he thought about the statue of God and told himself to be patient. It was only a matter of time before he arrived. After coming out of the Red Gate, Jinwoo saw that daylight was already here. He walked toward his car, planning to go to the Hunter Guild office, when a man in a suit appeared next to him. The man said his name was Adam White and that he worked for the Federal Bureau of Hunters. His tone sounded serious. Jinwoo thought it was strange that someone had come all the way from the United States just to talk to him. Adam said he had information no one else could share. He explained that his bureau wanted to help top hunters like Jinwoo, and after Jinwoo's success on Jeju Island, they had taken a keen interest. Jinwoo wasn't convinced and was ready to leave until Adam spoke the word, upgrader. That single word made Jinwoo stop. Adam led Jinwoo to a waiting car, and they drove off to the Bureau's main office. When they arrived, Michael Connor, the deputy director, was there to meet them. Connor skipped the usual greetings and immediately offered Jinwoo a chance to join the American Hunters. Jinwoo was curious, but only wanted to know about Upgrader. Connor motioned to a woman who stepped into the room. Her name was Norma Selner, and she was called the Upgrader. She was the only one who could make an awakened hunter stronger. Selner said her process could boost a hunter's power by up to 30% after 3 steps. Jinwoo remained unsure as he watched her begin. She held his wrist gently and told him to look at her eyes. As she focused, her vision suddenly went black. She blinked but saw nothing, until a dark shape appeared, its face twisted and frightening. Terrified, Selner fell back from her chair. 2 agents standing guard instantly pulled their guns, aiming at Jinwoo, panic in their eyes. Connor immediately ordered the agents to lower their weapons, reminding them of Jin Woo's reputation and warning that they would regret pointing guns at someone like him. Realizing their mistake, the agents quickly put their firearms away and hurried to Miss Selner's side. Connor turned back to Jin Woo, bowing his head in apology for his agent's actions. Jin Woo, still processing everything, simply nodded and reassured him that it was all right. Connor rushed to check on Selner. She was trembling, her breathing shallow and rapid. Seeing her in distress, he decided it would be best to delay any further tests. Adam guided Jin Woo out of the room as Connor stayed to help Selner recover. Eventually, Selner managed to speak in a shaky voice. She explained that Jin Woo was not an ordinary hunter. He was like a king, a powerful king unlike anything she had ever encountered. Connor asked if this meant Jin Woo's strength matched that of a national-level hunter, but Selner shook her head. What she had seen went beyond any ranking. In her mind, she had looked into Jin Woo's eyes and sensed a presence inside him, a force so deep and overwhelming that it seemed to look back at her. Fear gripped her as she added that there appeared to be no limit to Jin Woo's power. As Jin Woo left the Bureau's office, the atmosphere remained heavy. The Bureau of Hunters had hoped to recruit him, believing they could offer something valuable. Instead, they discovered something far beyond their understanding. The narrative then shifted to an earlier moment in time. In America, a hunter found himself trapped in a high-level dungeon, panic clear on his face as a chilling presence appeared. It was Silid, the Frost Monarch, on the hunt for rulers in that country. A few moments later, a gate opened behind the hunter, revealing Yogyamunt, the Transfiguration Monarch. Yogyamunt hurried towards Silid with news of a small island to the east. Silid frowned, questioning why Yogyamunt spoke of a place he had already claimed. The island belonged to the Shadow Monarch. Yogyamunt explained that the rulers planned to free Legia, who was south of that location, and he needed to go there immediately. He urged Silid to take over the Eastern Territory, but Silid pressed on, wondering about the Shadow Monarch's role. Yogyamunt reassured him that as long as the architect upheld the contract, everything would fall into place. Then he revealed a detail that made Silid's expression shift to one of excitement. The greatest fragment of light had been found in the east. At that moment, Silid sensed a new, powerful presence. A ruler had arrived. It was Sung Il Huan, Jin Woo's father. Il Huan had left traces of his power in America, drawing the monarchs there on purpose. His eyes blazed with anger as he demanded whether they meant Korea when they spoke of the small eastern island. Silid confirmed it and taunted Il Huan to follow if he dared. Il Huan did not hesitate. He launched a swift attack, but Silid raised a massive wall of ice that exploded on impact, causing the entire dungeon to shake. Returning to the present, Eugene Ho sat in the Bureau's office, fully focused on his new mission. Anyone who dared speak against Jin Woo was quickly silenced. After the Jeju Island raid, rumors had spread about Jin Woo's role, and his friend Jin Ho was determined to protect both his partner and their fledgling guild's reputation. Sitting at his desk, Jin Ho scrolled through every negative comment he could find, reporting each one with focused determination. Lost in his work, he didn't notice Jin Woo appear quietly behind him. The sudden presence startled Jin Ho, snapping him out of his concentration. Jin Woo casually asked if everything was all right, and Jin Ho quickly said yes. Then he noticed something odd. Jin Woo was still in his hunter gear. Jin Woo explained that he had just returned from clearing a gate and had brought back several high-level magic cores to help fund the guild. Jin Ho's mood brightened at the news. With resources like those, he thought, the guild would have no trouble paying future employees. Jin Woo looked puzzled when Jin Ho mentioned employees. Jin Ho reminded him that they needed one more member before their guild could be officially formed. But before they could talk more about that, another issue came up. They needed a name. Jin Woo shrugged, thinking it wasn't very important, but Jin Ho argued that a good name would define who they were. As they tossed around ideas, a knock sounded at the door. Jin Ho hesitated, curious about the visitor, then opened the door slowly and froze in shock. Standing in the hallway was Hunter Cha Hae-in, one of Korea's top-ranked hunters. Jin Woo, just as surprised, stepped forward. It was completely unexpected for someone of her stature to appear at their small office. He asked why she had come, and without missing a beat, Heian announced that she wanted to join their guild. Jinwoo frowned in confusion. It had only been 2 years since Heian's awakening, which meant she was still under contract with the official Hunters Guild. He assumed she couldn't leave so easily. But Heian calmly said she was willing to pay the penalty to break that contract, and she expected nothing in return. No signing bonus, no guaranteed salary. Jinwoo's disbelief grew. Why would she abandon one of Korea's most respected guilds for a brand new and proven one? He pressed her for more. Heian's confident exterior wavered. She lowered her gaze, clearly struggling to explain her true reason. After what had happened on Jeju Island, how Jinwoo had saved her from certain death, she wanted to be near him. But she couldn't admit that. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and said she simply sought a quieter, simpler life. Jinwoo listened closely, sensing there was more beneath her words. As an S-rank hunter himself, he understood the heavy burden that came with such status. Still, he wasn't about to let her join without testing her resolve. Jinwoo cleared his throat and announced that anyone joining their guild would have to pass an entrance test. Heian blinked in surprise. There had been no mention of a test in the recruitment notice. Jinwoo shrugged, suggesting it must have been an oversight on Jinho's part. For the trial, he said, she would have to face one of his summons, his strongest one yet. Heian didn't hesitate or flinch. She nodded, ready to accept the challenge. Jinwoo then suggested they move to the Hunter Association's gymnasium to conduct the test. As they prepared to leave, he realized the gymnasium was quite a distance away. He wanted to try out his shadow exchange skill to transport them both at once. He told Heian there was no need for a long walk. She only needed to stay close to him. Stepping toward her, Jinwoo extended his hand. Heian felt a lump in her throat as he came nearer than she had expected. Jinwoo reached out, and in an instant, both he and Heian sank into the shadows. Within a heartbeat, they reappeared inside the Hunter Association's gymnasium. As they arrived, the lights flickered on, sensing their mana. The large, open space was suddenly bright, and Heian stared around, still amazed by how fast they had moved. Her eyes settled on Jinwoo, who was already standing ready to begin the test. Before they could start, Heian realized she had left her sword behind. Jinwoo pointed out that the gym kept extra weapons on hand, mostly for practice, not top quality. Heian nodded and walked over to scan the rack. She picked up a sword that matched her usual weapon's weight and length, testing its balance in her hand. Satisfied, she turned back to Jinwoo. Jinwoo called Igris, the best swordsman among his shadow soldiers. He chose Igris because, although Baru was his strongest summon, Baru's power could be overwhelming and might harm Heian too much. Igris, on the other hand, offered a fair challenge. Jinwoo explained the rules quickly. Heian would win if she destroyed the summon. She would lose if she chose to give up. To keep things even, he took the Demon Monarch's sword from his inventory and handed it over to Igris. With a silent nod, Jinwoo signaled the start of the fight. Igris charged in first, swinging the Demon Monarch's sword with deadly precision. A crackling bolt of lightning shot toward Heian, its thunderous energy lighting up the space. Heian moved like a cat, sidestepping just in time as the blast slammed into the wall behind her, scorching it black. Jinwoo watched closely, impressed. If that attack had caught any part of her, it would have been fatal. Heian didn't hesitate. Gripping her borrowed sword, she lunged forward, meeting Igris head-on. Their blades collided with a shower of sparks, each strike echoing off the gym walls. Jinwoo expected a tough match, but as he watched, he realized he had underestimated her skill. Igris, even with the Demon Monarch's sword, was on the defensive. Heian's movements were sharp and precise, her timing perfect. With one swift combination of cuts, she forced Igris backward, driving him into the hard gym wall. The impact rattled the entire room. Before Igris could rise again, Jinwoo stopped the match. But Heian wasn't satisfied. She stood straight, breathing evenly, and asked if she was facing his strongest summon. Her gaze never wavered as she made it clear she wanted to fight his very best. Jinwoo hesitated, knowing who she meant. He worried she might get hurt, but her determination was obvious. She wouldn't back down. After a moment's pause, Jinwoo finally agreed. Without a word, he called Baru from the shadows. The massive shadow ant appeared, and instantly the gym's atmosphere changed. Even through the brightness, Baru's dark aura felt like a heavy weight in the air. Still, Heian didn't move. She tightened her grip on the sword, ready for whatever came next. Baru let out a low, thunderous roar that shook the floor. His hand shifted, and long, blade-like claws formed at his fingertips, each movement signaling a deadly strike. Just as Baru lunged forward, Jinwoo's firm voice cut through the silence. "Leave her unharmed." At once, Baru pulled his claws back, halting in mid-attack. Heian saw her chance and moved to strike, but Baru vanished before she could reach him. A chill ran down her spine. She recognized that disappearing act from Jeju Island. In that moment, she knew this test was far from over. Heian braced herself, not willing to fall for the same trick again. In a flash, Baru appeared behind her, his large shadow looming over her. But this time, she was ready. She swung her sword in a fast series of strikes, dozens of slashes cut through the air. But none of them hit. Baru dodged them with ease, barely moving. His cold eyes stayed fixed on her. No matter how fast or accurate she was, she couldn't touch him. Frustration built up inside Heian. She couldn't understand how he was so powerful. And if Baru was just a summon, what kind of strength did Jinwoo have to control him? As doubt crept in, Baru suddenly closed the gap between them. A wave of killing intent hit her like a wall. Her body froze. For a moment, it felt like the end. But instead of attacking, Baru let out a loud, terrifying roar. The force of his magic sent her flying across the floor, leaving her stunned. Jinwoo watched with a troubled look. He didn't enjoy seeing her struggle. He asked softly if she wanted to stop, hoping she would. But even after everything, Heian didn't give up. She still wanted to fight. Jinwoo looked at her carefully, trying to understand why. She had already seen the huge gap in their strength. Still, she refused to back down. He could feel Baru growing more impatient. Unlike the other shadows, Baru still acted like a predator. Jinwoo could tell he was struggling to hold back his killer instinct. Suddenly, Baru lost control. His instincts took over. With a flick of his hand, his claws came out, and he rushed at Heian with full killing intent. She barely dodged. Realizing she had to go all out, Heian activated her strongest move, Sword Dance. Her sword moved like a blur, each slash flowing into the next. The sound of metal filled the room. Baru blocked each strike with his claws, his face showing he was no longer enjoying the fight. Tired of playing around, Baru decided to end it. As Heian attacked again, he caught her sword with his hand. With a loud snap, the blade broke, and half of it fell to the ground. But Heian didn't stop. She poured all her magic into the broken blade. Its jagged edge started glowing brightly. She was about to use a new move, Blade of Light. Seeing her chance, she aimed the glowing weapon at Baru, just as he lowered his guard for a moment. Jinwoo's eyes widened. Something was wrong. In that moment, Baru's command to not harm Heian was gone. A deep instinct from his past took over, destroy all enemies. To him, Heian was now prey. Baru launched at her with full force. Heian froze. Her instincts screamed at her, but she couldn't react in time. Just as Baru's claws were about to hit her, Jinwoo appeared in a flash. He stopped Baru's attack with his bare hands. The two locked eyes. Baru realized his mistake. He stepped back and dropped to his knees, begging silently for forgiveness. Jinwoo let out a deep sigh. He understood, Baru's instincts had taken over, even against his orders. For a moment, Jinwoo stood still, eyes locked on the shadow kneeling before him. Then, his gaze shifted to Heian. She was down on one knee, chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. He couldn't understand. Why was she pushing herself this far? She was one of Korea's strongest hunters. Risking injury, or worse, over a simple guild test seemed senseless. Curious, Jinwoo finally asked what was driving her. Why go to such lengths? But she said nothing, refusing to meet his eyes. Her silence only left him more puzzled. Still trying to make sense of it, he asked the question that had been lingering in his mind. Was she doing all this because she had feelings for him? The moment he said it, Heian's head snapped up, shock written all over her face. It was like he'd jolted her out of some internal struggle. Embarrassed, Jinwoo brushed it off with a shrug. But after a long pause, she spoke, softly, almost to herself. He wasn't wrong. She did like him. Meanwhile, across the ocean at the U.S. Federal Bureau of Hunters, Director David Brennan was anything but pleased. The team they had sent to Korea had come back empty-handed. They had failed to bring in Sung Jinwoo, the hunter who had astonished the world with his power during the Jeju Island raid. In his office, Assistant Director Connor stood stiffly beside Miss Norma Selner, both trying to explain what had gone wrong. But Brennan wasn't interested in excuses, he wanted clarity. Connor laid everything out, detailing their failed attempts to recruit Jinwoo. Then came the more troubling part, Selner's analysis. According to her, Jinwoo wasn't just powerful. He was something else entirely. One of the monarchs. That caught Brennan off guard. If true, it meant they had completely underestimated what they were dealing with. He asked outright, did this mean Jinwoo was on the same level as a national-level hunter? Selner took a breath before responding. All awakened hunters, she explained, draw their strength from a place beyond this world, a realm she called the other side. Their powers weren't their own, but borrowed. She had always seen these channels of power, glowing lines that connected hunters to the source. Some hunters shone more brightly than others, those she called monarchs. But Jinwoo was different. The day she looked into his eyes, she hadn't seen a light. She had seen an abyss. There was no external source, no borrowed energy. What she saw was something infinite, a darkness without end. Jinwoo wasn't pulling power from elsewhere. He was the source. Her words left the room heavy with tension. Even the air seemed thicker. Director Brennan finally nodded, quietly thanking Selner for her insight. This changed everything. Without wasting time, he turned and began walking. Connor, confused, asked where he was going. Brennan simply told him to follow. They were heading to basement level 24. As they entered the elevator and began their descent, Brennan finally spoke. If they couldn't win Jinwoo over through Selner, they'd have to find another path. He wasn't about to let someone like Jinwoo slip through their fingers. Then, almost as an afterthought, he reminded Connor of the first S-rank gate that had ever appeared. It was a moment burned into history, a disaster so massive that no one who lived through it could ever forget. And the second Brennan mentioned it, Connor knew exactly what he meant. That catastrophic dungeon break had caused unimaginable devastation, leveling the entire West Coast in a wave of destruction the world had never seen before. In the aftermath, the U.S. government had launched an operation unlike any before. Lavish rewards were promised to draw in the world's most powerful hunters in a desperate bid to turn the tide. From that legendary raid, only 5 emerged alive. These weren't just survivors, they were warriors forged in the heart of chaos. And for their unmatched strength and sacrifice, they were each honored with a title that held global weight, national-level hunters. The monster behind the massacre was Kamish, the legendary dragon known as the Undying Flame. A creature so terrifying it had single-handedly decimated hundreds of elite hunters. Its name became synonymous with fear and destruction. As the elevator doors slid open at basement level 24, Director Brennan turned to Connor with a question that held more meaning than it seemed. Could Connor really believe that nothing of value had come from that tragedy? Connor paused, then realization dawned on him. Brennan's expression confirmed it. There was something. They entered the final chamber on the level, a secure room that felt more like a vault than anything else. Brennan moved to a wall-mounted safe and entered a series of codes. The door opened with a heavy click, revealing a carefully preserved artifact. Inside lay a runed stone, retrieved from Kamish remains. Brennan explained that 8 years had passed since the dragon's death, and in all that time, no hunter had been able to unlock the power sealed within the rune. Not one. Its energy remained untouched, like a dormant force waiting, not for just anyone, but for someone specific, someone capable of awakening it. As Brennan stared at the relic, his thoughts drifted to what this could mean. Perhaps this rune, lying in silence all these years, was the answer they needed, a possible key to dealing with Jinwoo. Meanwhile, back in Korea, Jinwoo stood in front of his bathroom mirror, still thinking about what Hyein had said earlier. Her confession had caught him completely off guard. Now, alone with his thoughts, he studied his reflection. Had he really changed that much? He didn't think of himself as particularly good-looking. To him, he still looked lean and average at best. Curious, he turned toward the living room where Gina was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Smirking to himself, he decided to get a second opinion. But before he could finish his question, Gina hit him with a cold dose of reality. She scoffed, asking where this sudden confidence had come from. To her, he was still the same lazy brother as always. Definitely not the heartthrob he imagined. Jinwoo laughed and pinched her cheek, which quickly turned into their usual back-and-forth teasing. As they calmed down, the conversation shifted. Jinwoo casually mentioned that he was planning to start his own guild. Gina, now actually interested, asked if he had thought of a name yet. He replied with solo play guild. She instantly rejected it. It made no sense, she said. Jinwoo wasn't a true solo hunter anymore. His strength came from commanding a literal army of shadows. There was nothing solo about that. After a brief pause, she suggested another name, Ahjin Guild. She explained her logic. Ah stood for I, and Jin meant to advance or move forward. Jinwoo found the meaning thoughtful, but what really made him laugh was when she admitted the real reason behind her suggestion. It was just her name spelled backward. Still, it wasn't bad. In fact, the more he thought about it, the more it grew on him. That same night, Pan lay in bed, burying her face into her pillow. Embarrassment washed over her as she recalled the moment she basically confessed her feelings to Jinwoo. She groaned quietly, replaying every second in her mind. What had she been thinking? She pulled the blanket over her face, groaning inwardly. The more she tried to push the thought away, the harder it clung to her mind. Did Jinwoo think she was weird now? No matter how much she tried to shake the memory, it kept creeping back in, making her head go blank each time. She tried to reason with herself. Her feelings made sense. He'd saved her life. Admiring someone like that wasn't strange. But the truth was, it wasn't just admiration. What she felt went far beyond gratitude, and she knew it. Her thoughts briefly wandered to Min Byung-yu, the healer who had played a critical role in saving her life. But as his image surfaced, something else came with it, a voice. Faint, but familiar. It echoed in the back of her mind like a half-forgotten dream. She closed her eyes, trying to hold on to it before it slipped away again. Then it returned. The voice was definitely his, and it was speaking about Jinwoo. Piece by piece, the memory began to take shape. She saw Byung-yu's figure, not the composed and calm man she remembered, but someone deeply concerned. His expression was serious, his voice urgent. He had warned her, told her to be cautious of Jinwoo's power, to pass on a message, to make sure Jinwoo knew how dangerous his strength could become. A cold shiver went through her. Haeun's eyes flew open, and she sat upright in bed, heart racing. Elsewhere, at the headquarters of the Knights Guild, tension was brewing. Hunter Yoontae rushed in to speak with Guild Master Park Jong-soo, bringing troubling news. A new gate had surfaced just the day before. It wasn't officially classified as S-rank, but it was close enough to demand serious attention. The bigger issue? They still hadn't secured a raid permit. Jong-soo frowned. The guild didn't have the manpower to put together a proper team for a gate that dangerous. But they also couldn't afford to ignore it. Letting another major guild, like Fame, claim a gate that had spawned right in their neighborhood would make them look weak. Yoontae was blunt. Their guild's Achilles heel hadn't changed. They lacked a top-tier hunter. No S-rank meant their options were always limited. As they debated what to do, young Yerim, an A-rank healer, joined the discussion. She offered a suggestion. Instead of teaming up with another guild, why not recruit a single hunter? Jong-soo was skeptical at first. One hunter wasn't going to change anything, he thought. But then realization hit him. She wasn't talking about just any hunter, she meant Sung Jinwoo. Suddenly, everything made sense. Bringing Jinwoo on board could do more than help them clear the gate. It could restore the Knights Guild's reputation. Jong-soo didn't need more convincing. If they had any shot at pulling this off, he'd have to speak to Jinwoo in person. And fast. The next day, back at his office, Jinwoo arrived with a decision in hand. He'd finally settled on a name for his new guild, Ahjin Guild. Jinho lit up with excitement. It was a huge relief, especially after hearing Jinwoo seriously consider names like Solo Play Guild. Compared to that, Ahjin Guild sounded perfect. With the name finalized, they now needed one more member to meet the minimum requirement to register. Jinho naturally assumed Jinwoo would ask Hunter Chahayan to join. She was strong, reliable, and had a good reputation. But Jinwoo surprised him. He turned her down. Jinwoo explained that he wasn't looking for someone active in the guild scene. He wanted someone quiet, someone who held a license but had no intention of raiding or drawing attention. Jinho was puzzled, but Jinwoo already had someone in mind. As they were deep in discussion, a sudden knock at the door broke the moment. Jinwoo briefly wondered if it was Hayan again, but when he opened it, 3 unfamiliar faces stood before him: Park Joksu, Yute, and Young Yerim from the Knights Guild. Without wasting time, Joksu introduced himself and cut straight to the chase. He showed Jinwoo a video of a massive gate that had just appeared in Busan. While it wasn't officially labeled an S-rank gate, its enormous size made it the largest ever recorded in the city. The situation was critical. Joksu explained the problem. The Knights Guild was struggling to get a raid permit because they lacked an S-rank hunter. That's why they'd come all this way to ask Jinwoo to join their assault team. With him on board, they could meet the requirements and secure the permit. Trying to sweeten the deal, Joksu offered Jinwoo 20% of the profits, double the usual 10% share most S-rank hunters received. But Jinwoo responded with a firm counteroffer, a 50-50 split. More importantly, he made it clear he wanted to be treated as a guild, not just another hunter. Joksu realized Jinwoo wasn't someone to be easily swayed but agreed to the terms, with one condition: Jinwoo would have to defeat the dungeon boss. Without hesitation, Jinwoo accepted. Joksu reminded him the raid had to take place no later than the next day. Jinwoo promised he wouldn't be late. As the meeting wrapped up, Jinwoo's phone buzzed. Stepping outside, he answered and was greeted by a warm, familiar voice, his mother. She'd just gotten a cell phone and called simply to hear him speak. Jinwoo smiled and suggested they have dinner together that night. It had been too long since they'd spent time together. She agreed, and Jinwoo looked forward to the evening. The next day, at Guanggali Beach in Busan, the elite hunters of the Knights Guild had gathered at the meeting point. Guildmaster Park Joksu stood among them, a mix of excitement and nerves as he waited for Jinwoo's arrival. The start time was rapidly approaching, only 5 minutes left. At that moment, Jinwoo stepped out of his apartment, glanced up at the sky, and felt it was time. Without hesitation, he activated Shadow Exchange and vanished. Back at the beach, a large crowd had gathered, eyes fixed on the massive gate looming over them, its size intimidating even under the dark clouds. Jinwoo surveyed the scene quietly. Several raid teams were assembled, and he was impressed by the number of A-rank hunters present. As he moved forward, he quickly found himself surrounded by fellow hunters eager to see him in action, especially after his legendary performance on Jeju Island. The buzz of excitement and curiosity filled the air, but Jinwoo felt a bit uncomfortable under so much attention. Noticing his unease, young Yerim stepped in, deflecting the flood of questions and giving Jinwoo a much-needed breather. Meanwhile, Joksu, thrilled to see Jinwoo, welcomed him enthusiastically and addressed the group. As guild master, he declared himself the raid leader. That announcement, however, was met with disappointment by several hunters. Many had hoped Jinwoo would take the lead instead. Even though some hunters looked disappointed, Joksu stayed firm. He told them that Jinwoo's job was to protect the back line and keep everyone safe, a very important role for the raid. With that, Joksu gave the signal to start. The team moved forward carefully, stepping closer to the huge gate and whatever dangers waited inside. While things were calm at Guanggali Beach after Jinwoo arrived, something dangerous was happening far away. At Jina's high school, 3 boys were wandering the halls, grumbling about being sent on an errand by their art teacher. They were going to the second art classroom, which had been turned into a storage room a long time ago. When they unlocked the door, a cloud of dust came out, filling the air with a musty smell. They talked about how many statues they needed to carry back, when one of the boys suddenly stopped. He stared at something in the corner. The others looked too. There, set into the wall, was a big blue gate. Curious, one of the boys stepped forward and reached out to touch it, sure nothing would happen. Then, a crack appeared in the gate. Before he could pull back, a giant hand grabbed his head tightly. He tried to get free, but the grip was too strong. A sickening crack echoed as his skull was crushed. Blood splattered on the walls. The other two boys froze in horror and barely screamed before the gate shattered. Monsters started coming out of the broken gate. The first were two huge orcs. Their sharp senses picked up on the nearby humans immediately. The whole school was full of prey. One orc, excited for the hunt, told the other to call their friends. Once more orcs arrived, they planned to kill everyone in the building and take over. The leader walked down the hall and saw two students. Without hesitation, he charged at them with his axe. The students were too scared to move. In seconds, a normal school day turned into a nightmare. One student managed to grab their phone and dial the Hunters Association emergency number. An operator answered quickly. On the other side was a scared teenage girl, hiding in the bathroom and barely able to speak. The operator stayed calm and asked how she could help. The girl whispered that monsters were in the school and she was scared. The operator told her to stay calm and said hunters were on their way. She asked the girl to describe the monsters. Between tears, the girl said they had green skin, ugly faces, and looked like humans, orcs. The operator knew it was serious. Before she could say more, a deep growl came through the phone. Then, a scream. The line went dead. The school had become a bloodbath. Some students got away, but many didn't. Blood covered the halls. Those left were either running or hiding, terrified. Orcs with blood on their axes stood over the bodies of their victims. Although some students managed to escape, the cruel, beastly eyes of the orcs shone with satisfaction. There were still plenty more trapped on the top floor. Inside one classroom, a group of students huddled together, pressing their bodies against the walls. They had barricaded the door with desks and chairs, but it was a weak defense. The boys grabbed whatever they could find, chairs, mops, anything that might work as a weapon. But their hands shook, and their eyes told the truth. They knew it wouldn't be enough. Suddenly, the door burst open as the leader orc slammed through. Panic spread. One boy, desperate to run, sprinted for the back door. But an orc waiting in the shadows knocked him down instantly. With both exits blocked, the remaining students were trapped like prey in a corner. They pressed against the walls, watching in horror as the orcs closed in. Among them, Gina huddled with her classmates, her heart pounding in fear. But even in the terror, she held on to one hope, her brother Jinwoo. She silently called out to him, believing with all her heart that he would come for her. One of the orcs scanned the group and sensed something different, magic energy coming from Gina. His bloodthirsty eyes locked onto her. As he stepped closer, ready to strike, one of Gina's classmates bravely stepped in front to block him. She summoned every bit of courage she had, but it was no use. The orc's eyes stayed fixed on Gina as he raised his massive axe. Frozen with fear, Gina squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the worst. Then, something unexpected happened. A high orc shadow soldier clad in black armor suddenly appeared and grabbed the orc's wrist with an iron grip. Before the orc could react, the shadow soldier slammed its fist down on his head with incredible force. The blow was so powerful that the orc flew through the roof like a rocket. More high orc shadow soldiers appeared from the shadows, their eyes scanning for threats. They formed a strong, unbreakable wall around Gina. The battle had changed. She was safe. Jinwoo's shadow soldiers had arrived just in time to secure the school, while Jinwoo himself had entered the dungeon with the Knights Guild raid team. Inside the dungeon, they faced a terrifying twin-headed ogre. The creature roared and swung its massive battle axe, trying to crush anything in its path. Jiangsu, the group's tank, charged forward and raised his shield just in time to block the powerful attack. The force of the blow shook the ground, but Jiangsu held firm. As Jiangsu held the line, he called out to Yute. Yute dashed in with lightning speed and skill. He leapt onto the ogre and slashed at both its eyes. The beast screamed in pain, thrashing wildly. Yute signaled the others to attack. Taking advantage of the moment, the Knights Guild hunters launched a coordinated counterattack. The frontline fighters slashed deep into the ogre's thick skin while mages behind them fired burning spells. Covered in wounds and burns, the ogre staggered backward and then collapsed with a heavy thud. Jiangsu called for a brief regroup, acknowledging how tough the raid was turning out to be. Running into a twin-headed ogre right at the dungeon entrance was rare and definitely a bad sign. Jinwu scanned the area and identified the creature as a gatekeeper. Jiangsu explained that such monsters usually meant there was an army of undead lurking deeper inside. Trying to lighten the mood, Yute joked about not jinxing their luck, but before anyone could respond, they noticed something strange. The undead inside weren't charging at them as expected. Instead, they were retreating, backing away as if something far worse was chasing them. Jinwu's instincts kicked in, adrenaline surging as he picked up urgent signals from the high orc warriors he had sent to protect Jina. Something was clearly wrong. Without hesitation, he turned to Jiangsu and told him he had to deal with an urgent matter. Jiangsu was caught off guard and worried about the risks of losing Jinwu's support during the raid, but Jinwu stayed calm and confident. He assured them he would send someone just as reliable to take his place. Without wasting time, he summoned the most powerful soldier in his shadow army, Baru, and ordered him to protect the humans and handle any threats however he saw fit. The sheer presence of Baru, radiating overwhelming mana, sent a wave of fear through the hunters, who instinctively stepped back, uneasy about fighting alongside such a monstrous being. Jinwu calmly reassured them that his shadow soldiers, including Baru, would back them up and told Jiangsu that 20 of his shadows would be more than enough to clear the dungeon. Yerim, still shocked, questioned Jinwu's decision to leave after summoning such an overwhelming force, but one cold glance at Jinwu's icy expression shut her up. He made it clear that if they didn't want his help, he could withdraw it. But whatever happened next would be on the Knights Guild, not him. Realizing how serious this was, Jiangsu quickly agreed. Jinwu checked the cooldown timer for his shadow exchange skill, frustration rising when he saw there was still over an hour left. He couldn't wait that long. Determined, he sprinted toward the exit. Just as he was about to fight through the undead blocking his way, something unexpected happened. The creatures dropped to their knees and bowed before him. Jinwu's eyes narrowed. Maybe they were reacting to his necromancer powers, but now wasn't the time to think about it. He dismissed his dagger back into his inventory and burst out of the dungeon's exit, summoning his winged dragon, Kaisel. Outside the gate, the crowd stood frozen, watching in awe. Ignoring their curious stares, Jinwu climbed onto Kaisel's back, his eyes burning with determination. With a single command, Kaisel took off, soaring at breakneck speed through the sky, racing toward Jina. Meanwhile, back at the high school, the leader orc's head was sliced clean in two, its massive body crashing to the floor. The towering shadow soldier slammed the remaining 2 orcs into the ground with brutal force. The students, frozen with fear, could only watch in horror, unable to process what had just happened. In an instant, all 3 orcs attacking the classroom were gone. The shadow soldiers now stood silently, guarding Jina. Still confused and in shock, Jina wondered if her brother had arrived. But as she looked around, the shadow soldiers refused to let her leave, pointing toward the danger still lurking in the building. Suddenly, a thunderous boom echoed through the halls as the dungeon gate cracked open and a throne emerged. The final restriction was lifted, releasing the dungeon's master, Grokter, the orc warlord and chief of the Red Blade tribe. Sitting on his throne, he radiated a terrifying presence, ready to wreak havoc on the school. His moment of calm was shattered when a panicked subordinate rushed in, breathless, reporting that a group of high orcs were aiding the humans. Grokter, unimpressed, asked how many. When told there were only 3, he scoffed, calling it pathetic and mocked the idea that his warriors couldn't handle them. Raising his massive axe, he ordered his subordinate to lead the way. When they reached the classroom, Grokter wasted no time. With a powerful swing, he struck the towering shadow soldier, sending it flying across the room. The other orcs cheered, chanting their leader's name. Despite the shadow soldier's strength, they were no match for Grokter. Proudly, he pointed to the tattoos covering his body, each one a mark of an enemy he had slain, and taunted the shadows, demanding a better fight. When they managed to block his strikes, he nodded at their resilience but stayed dominant. With a swift motion, he cut through them, expecting them to fall for good. But to his shock, the shadows regenerated instantly. Grokter frowned, wondering if it was some kind of sorcery. No matter how many times he struck, the shadows kept coming back. Frustration boiled inside him as he searched for a way to end them. A voice nagged in his head, urging him to kill the humans, and the constant pressure gave him a headache. Suddenly, he realized that if these shadows were controlled by magic, killing their caster would stop them. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Gina. She stood behind the towering shadows, trembling. Grokter was sure she was the source. Without hesitation, he ordered his orcs to capture her. Knowing the shadows would be vulnerable while regenerating, one of his subordinates lunged at Gina. The shadow soldiers tried to block the attack, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the other orcs, who relentlessly slashed and stabbed to keep them away. As the battle raged, Grokter stepped forward and grabbed Gina by the mouth, lifting her off the ground effortlessly. A wicked grin spread across his face as he prepared to crush her. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed from a distance. Grokter's instincts screamed at him. Something was coming fast. Fear froze him as the thunderous sound grew louder. His grip loosened, and Gina fell to the floor, gasping for air. Her friend rushed to her side, frantic and concerned, but Grokter wasn't paying attention anymore. His eyes locked on the overwhelming force approaching. With every second it drew closer, his jaw clenched tighter, eyes wide as he realized the true power heading their way. Panic surged through him as he shouted to his orc warriors to brace for impact. But before they could react, an earth-shattering explosion tore through the building. The classroom wall was blasted apart, sending dust and debris everywhere. Gina coughed, struggling to breathe as her vision blurred from the chaos. Amid the destruction, a familiar presence appeared beside her. Without saying a word, Jinwoo gently patted her head, a quiet promise that she was safe now. Grokter swallowed hard, facing this new, incredibly powerful opponent. The sheer presence of Jinwoo sent a chill down his spine, a fear he had never felt before. Grokter stood tall and proud, announcing he was the chief of the Red Blade tribe. But before he could say more, Jinwoo raised his hand sharply. "Be quiet. Wait," he said, his voice cold and serious. Grokter stopped immediately, frozen by Jinwoo's strong presence. Gina ran to her brother, tears falling as her coughing stopped. Jinwoo gently brushed her hair and asked if she was okay. He looked around and saw the other students were safe. Relief showed on his face, but then he noticed a clear handprint on Gina's cheek and neck. His anger flared up. "Stay with her," Jinwoo told Igris firmly. He then called more shadow soldiers to take the rest of the students out safely. The orcs realized their chance was slipping. They tried to move forward, but Jinwoo's glare stopped them. "Who said you could move?" he asked sharply. Grokter looked confused. "Who are you? How do you speak our language?" he growled. Jinwoo said nothing, his silent stare more frightening than words. Frustrated, Grokter shouted, "Attack!" The orcs charged with weapons raised, but they didn't stand a chance. One orc swung a huge axe, but Jinwoo caught its fingers easily, crushing them. The orc screamed in pain as Jinwoo flipped him and slammed him hard on the ground, then stepped on him without mercy. Two more orcs rushed, but Jinwoo flicked his wrist and used his power, sending them crashing into each other. Then, with one punch, their bodies exploded. The other orcs kept coming, but Jinwoo moved like lightning, breaking them apart with just his fingers. Heads, arms, and chests shattered with every touch, and soon dozens of orcs lay on the ground. Jinwoo stood strong, facing Grokter. Without warning, Jinwoo grabbed Grokter's jaw and slammed his head into the wall. Grokter gasped for air, dizzy and confused. Jinwoo looked down the hallway and saw the bodies of fallen students. His anger grew cold and fierce. "Why did you kill them?" Jinwoo asked quietly. Grokter trembled. "A voice told me to kill all humans." Jinwoo's eyes became sharper. "Did that voice tell you to kill me too?" Grokter begged for mercy, saying he never wanted to fight Jinwoo. But Jinwoo only grew colder. "Maybe you never saw me as human." Then, without warning, Jinwoo pulled out the Demon Monarch's dagger and killed Grokter quickly and without mercy. At the same time, far away at Guangali Beach, the fight in the dungeon continued. Jinwoo's shadow ants covered the cave walls, their loud cries echoing everywhere. The Knights Guild hunters looked nervous. Some whispered, worried that these creatures might turn against them at any moment. Yute looked uneasy, glancing at Jiangsu for some kind of plan. Jiangsu, deep in thought, knew they couldn't turn back now. If they did, the reporters outside would tear them apart, and quitting out of fear wasn't an option. Just as he was gathering his courage, Baru suddenly appeared right in front of him. The monstrous figure made Jiangsu freeze, his confidence draining fast. He tried nervously to speak politely, but Baru just stared silently, making Jiangsu even more uneasy. Then Baru vanished as quickly as he came. Before Jiangsu could even process what happened, Baru popped up again and tossed something at his feet. It was a severed head, the head of a death knight, one of the strongest monsters they could face. Jiangsu's breath caught as he looked at it, stunned. Baru had taken down such a powerful enemy with ease. Baru went back to commanding the shadow ants, while Jiangsu slumped to the ground, overwhelmed. His teammates rushed over, asking if it was still safe to follow the shadows. Gathering himself, Jiangsu nodded and pointed at the severed head. He reminded them how valuable magic stones from high-level monsters like this were. Then he asked if they still wanted to move forward. Before he even finished, the raid party was already moving. Yunte laughed, telling Jiangsu to hurry up and keep up. After a long time, the Knights Guild Strike squad finally reached the boss's lair. Inside, a chilling sight awaited them. An arch-lich, the dungeon's boss, surrounded by death knights. Fear froze them in place. None expected to face such a powerful, feared monster. Jiangsu quickly sized up the situation. Arch-liches were known to wipe out entire guilds. He remembered the Gold Dragon Guild from China. Elite hunters wiped out by an arch-lich, nearly causing a dungeon break until Lu Jigang stopped it. His gut screamed danger. Their squad, only A-rank hunters, stood no chance. Yute turned to Jiangsu, worried, asking what to do. Before Jiangsu could answer, a horde of death knights marched toward them, weapons ready. Jiangsu snapped to action, ordering his team to block the doors. Yerim instantly activated her holy shield, creating a barrier that sealed the entrance. Jiangsu knew their time was running out. Without Jinwu, survival looked impossible. Yerim, struggling to hold the barrier, looked at Jiangsu with concern. She warned it wouldn't last 5 minutes. Then Baru stepped forward. Without hesitation, he walked past the hunters and stood right in front of the arch-lich. The boss, shocked to see the monarch's army, demanded why they were attacking. Baru stayed calm, showing his sharp mandibles and claws. He coldly said they were chosen by the king. The arch-lich was not. Furious and shocked, the arch-lich said it would speak to the king itself. Before it could finish, Baru appeared inches from its face. The arch-lich barely had time to react before Baru's claw pierced its chest. The room fell silent as the lich stared down in horror. Baru gripped its heart and yanked it free. The boss trembled, shaking its head and begging Baru not to destroy it. But Baru didn't listen. Without hesitation, he crushed the heart in his fist. In an instant, the arch-lich and its death knights dissolved into thin air, leaving only a faint echo behind. Baru let out a victorious roar, having taken down the dungeon's final boss. The Knights Guild members watched in shock and awe, amazed that the raid ended without a single casualty. But far away at Jina's high school, the mood was dark and heavy. A crowd had gathered, filled with panic and grief as parents mourned children lost in the dungeon attack. Meanwhile, Jinwu sat in a car beside President Go Gun-hee, leaving the chaos behind. As they drove, President Go gave him an update. Out of all the students, 213 had escaped safely, and 10 others were rescued from the building. Sadly, many didn't make it in time. He also shared troubling news. Over the past 6 months, gates had been appearing more often around the world. At the same time, more people were awakening as hunters. It felt like the world was trying to balance the rising dangers from the gates with those able to fight them. Jinwu calmly asked why the chairman had come in person. President Go explained that many countries wanted to meet Jinwu because of his S-rank status. Some had even made tempting offers to recruit him. The association had kept Jinwu's info safe so far, but it was up to him whether to engage with these nations. President Go warned that if Jinwu left Korea, the country might struggle to handle the coming changes. Soon, they arrived at the hospital where Jinho was being treated. As Jinwoo stepped out, President Go made a final plea, urging him to stay. The association would support him with whatever he needed. Korea had already lost 3 S-rank hunters recently, 2 in Jeju, 1 in the US, and losing Jinwoo would be a huge blow. After a pause, Jinwoo made an unexpected request. He asked permission to enter high-ranking gates alone, without the usual minimum number of hunters. President Go was shocked. The rules were there to keep hunters safe. But as he thought about Jinwoo's words, he realized this was probably why Jinwoo started his own guild. Jinwoo confirmed it and asked if the request was too much. Though the idea of a solo raid was unheard of, President Go understood Jinwoo wasn't an ordinary hunter. Hesitant but willing, he promised to do everything possible to make it happen. After dropping Jinwoo off at the hospital, President Go headed straight to the National Assembly. There, he pushed to have summon minions officially recognized as members of strike squads. But one assembly member immediately rejected the idea, calling it ridiculous. The assembly member argued that the Hunter Association was supposed to treat all hunters equally and accused President Go of bending the rules just for Sung Jinwoo. Staying calm, President Go admitted it was preferential treatment. Then he asked the assembly a simple but powerful question. If they had to choose between sending a whole squad of regular hunters or letting Jinwoo clear a dungeon alone, which would they pick? The room went quiet as everyone felt the weight of that question. President Go reminded them that guilds from around the world were eager to recruit Jinwoo. If Korea refused to make exceptions, there was a real chance Jinwoo might leave for another country. He warned them not to repeat past mistakes, like when Hunter Hwang Dong-soo defected to the United States. He also pointed out that if another S-rank gate appeared in Korea, they would need someone strong enough to protect the nation. Meanwhile, far from all the political talk, Yoo Soo-yeon was busy with her work in the entertainment industry. After finishing a shoot, she saw a call from her brother Jinho. He invited her to join the Ahjin Guild, saying she wouldn't have to do much work. They just needed one more founding member to complete the guild's registration. Skeptical, Soo-yeon joked if he'd fallen for a scam. Jinho laughed and said she'd be surprised once she met the guy behind it. Soo-yeon went to the Ahjin Guild office, where Jinho introduced her to Jinwoo, explaining she was his cousin and an A-rank hunter. It hit Soo-yeon then she was standing in front of the famous Sung Jinwoo. Jinho teased her, saying she was the real celebrity in the family, but Soo-yeon was more excited to meet Jinwoo than to think about her own fame. Watching them, Jinwoo thought about the family. Jinho was a D-rank hunter, Soo-yeon was A-rank. He wondered if genetics had anything to do with awakening powers. He knew siblings sometimes both gained abilities, and his own father had been a hunter too. Turning back to Soo-yeon, Jinwoo asked if Jinho had explained everything. She said yes, they needed a founding member. Jinwoo warned her that joining the guild would likely attract a lot of media attention. Was she ready for that? Unfazed, Soo-yeon shrugged it off, saying anything was better than being tied to Jin-sung. Curious, Jinwoo asked who Jin-sung was. Jinho quietly explained that Jin-sung was his older brother, known for his terrible personality. As Jinwoo thought about that, Soo-yeon hesitated, then smiled slightly and asked if he would take a selfie with her. Jinwoo agreed, and Soo-yeon quickly posted it online. The photo went viral, sparking conversations everywhere. When Haein saw the photo, an uneasy feeling washed over her. Her heart hurt, her body trembled, and for the first time, she felt a deep insecurity she couldn't ignore. After the National Assembly approved Jinwoo's request to recognize his summoned minions as official strike squad members, he and Jinho arrived at the site of a newly appeared A-rank gate. It was their guild's first raid since getting the authorization. Jinho stood in awe, staring at the massive gate towering before them. Jinwoo stayed focused, ready to lead the mission. They weren't alone. Woo Jinchul, the chief inspector from the Hunters Association's surveillance team, stood nearby, scrutinizing Jinwoo's shadow soldiers with a keen eye. He quickly realized that each of them was no less than B rank, with several possibly even at A rank. Watching them pass the safety protocols for the A rank gate with ease, Jinchul understood why those doubting Jinwoo's special treatment didn't grasp the true magnitude of his strength. When all preparations were finalized, Jinchul gave the signal to proceed. But before crossing the gate's threshold, he shocked both Jinwoo and Jinho by removing his coat, revealing a full suit of armor beneath his formal clothes. Chairman Go had ordered him to oversee the raid in person, ensuring the mission's safety. He requested to accompany them as the inspection team's representative for the day. Jinwoo raised an eyebrow, silently questioning whether Jinchul was ready for what awaited inside. At the time, Jinchul was unaware of the real danger, but the moment the dungeon's horrors unfolded before him, his doubts vanished. Within the dungeon, a vicious A-rank Naga was being mercilessly torn apart by Jinwoo's shadow soldiers. Nearby, the shadow ants feasted alive on their prey, an unsettling scene of carnage. Iron and Tank charged through the monsters like battering rams, while Baru dispatched a Naga's head with a single, effortless stroke. Jinchul wiped the sweat from his brow as he took in the carnage. Even elite hunters with mastery over magic and combat would find this battlefield daunting. Yet Jinwoo's army crushed every threat without hesitation. One figure stood out, Igris, who wielded the Demon Monarch's sword with lightning speed, unleashing bolts of energy with each swing. He obliterated Nagas almost instantly, his overwhelming presence making Jinchul wonder if Igris even surpassed A-rank hunters. For a fleeting moment, Jinchul questioned if he himself could stand toe-to-toe with him. While his shadows fought, Jinwoo directed a separate unit to mine mana crystals efficiently, leaving no resource untapped. Watching all this, Jinchul finally understood why Chairman Go sent him here, to witness firsthand that Jinwoo wasn't just a solo raider. He was a force capable of clearing an entire A-rank dungeon, harvesting valuable corpses, and mining mana crystals all at once. Suddenly, the dungeon's boss emerged, a colossal Naga brandishing dual tridents. Its imposing presence sent a chill through Jinchul's spine. But Jinwoo remained composed. He ordered the mining squad to continue their work and called his soldiers back to him. Jinchul was baffled. Why send away the shadow soldiers when they could easily overwhelm the boss? Jinwoo merely smirked, drawing his Demon Monarch's dagger. He explained that depending too much on his shadows would dull his own edge. Then, with lightning speed, Jinwoo lunged. The Naga roared, swinging its massive tridents, but Jinwoo dodged with flawless precision. Before the creature could react, Jinwoo's blade sliced clean through its head in a single, perfect strike. Jinchul stood in stunned silence as the beast's lifeless body collapsed to the ground. A notification appeared in front of Jinwoo. He had reached level 101. Even more impressively, all his job-specific skills had leveled up. His shadow exchange cooldown was reduced by an entire hour. Jinwoo's eyes lit up with excitement as he realized that if the cooldown on his shadow exchange kept decreasing at this rate, soon he'd be able to move around freely without worrying about his mother and sister's safety. Meanwhile, Jinchul stood there, stunned, still struggling to process the incredible scene he had just witnessed. Jinwoo had sliced through the Naga's tough scales using only 2 daggers, something that defied all expectations. Then Jinchul noticed something else. Jinwoo raised his hand above the fallen Naga and softly spoke a single word, "Arise." The system confirmed that the shadow enhancement was successful. His new summon, though smaller than most, radiated a massive surge of mana. Jinwoo suspected that, like Tusk, it could grow larger with the help of magic. The system then asked Jinwoo to name this new soldier. After a moment's thought, he settled on the name Jima. Watching in awe, Jinho couldn't help but admire Jinwoo's ability to turn such a powerful enemy into an ally. Despite his enthusiasm, Jinho reminded Jinwoo they needed to leave. But Jinwoo remained fixated on the huge corpse before him, pondering his next move. Outside the gate, a crowd of reporters waited eagerly, ready to capture any breaking news. Then, the enormous figure of Tusk appeared, hoisting the Naga boss's body on his broad shoulders. The crowd gasped, flashes lit up the area, and panic briefly rippled through the reporters. But once they realized the creature was Jinwoo's summon, their fear quickly turned to excitement. Feeling a bit awkward under the spotlight, Tusk responded with a big, sheepish grin. Jinwoo and Jinho exchanged a glance, realizing their first raid under official sanction was drawing far more attention than anticipated. Nearby, Chief Wu Jinchul remained visibly shaken, the brutal images of the dungeon fresh in his mind. Later, at the Hunters Association, Jinchul reported the events to President Go Gunhee. His brow was slick with sweat, his eyes troubled, as he admitted the raid had been far from ordinary. It was a massacre. He recounted every brutal detail, and President Go let out a deep sigh, sensing the toll it had taken on the inspector. "Take some time to rest," the chairman advised calmly as Jinchul left the room. Left alone, President Go stood by the window deep in thought. Jinwoo had not only cleared an A-rank dungeon, but also collected monster remains and mined mana crystals entirely on his own. To him, Jinwoo was more than a hunter. He was a one-man guild, an unstoppable force. A slow smile crept across the chairman's face. His intuition had been right all along. Korea and the world were on the cusp of a huge power shift, and the first signs were already emerging far away in Tokyo. Suddenly, the hustle and bustle of Shinjuku came to a halt. Pedestrians froze, conversations ceased. All eyes turned skyward toward a massive shadow looming overhead. Towering above the city was a gigantic portal, the size of a skyscraper. An S-rank gate had just appeared in the heart of the district. As the colossal S-rank gate loomed ominously over Shinjuku, a chilling sense of anticipation swept through the city. What dangers and powers awaited inside this new gateway? How would Sung Jinwoo rise to face the challenge that could change everything? The next chapter of this saga is about to unfold, revealing battles and secrets that will push Jinwoo and his allies to their limits. Make sure you don't miss a single moment of the action. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell now, so you're ready when the next arc begins.